Mrs. Reyes,
Here.
Mr. Nielsen, Mrs. Contreras,
Here.
Mrs. Sashanek.
Here.
Have a pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll call for a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Is there any board member statements? Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me. So I was just so excited to see how the school year ended for so many of our students. I was able to go to the dance concert and the choir concert at Fine Arts, and those were amazing shows. It had, in fact, the 8th graders singing at the choir concert brought me to tears. And then I was able to do the promotion ceremony at Fine Arts as well, and I was here for Littleton Online, and so I thought the Littleton Online promotion, you could tell it was their first time doing it. They were super nervous, but it was amazing as well. And Fine Arts, with their incorporation of music during their promotion, was great. I want to commend Quinton Elementary. I live across the street from Quinton, and my kids are loving breakfast, and like they wake up and want to go get school breakfast because they miss school milk. So that's saving my pocketbook. So, and then also I just got back from the Arizona School Board Association's Summer Leadership Conference, and I was really excited to do some breakouts about what to do with data feedback from our community and trying to understand what different things we could do with that. So I just have had a really busy past 4 weeks, I guess.
Thank you very much. Anything else?
So I was able to attend promotion ceremonies for the first time this year, and that was exciting. I got to attend Quinton and Country Place, so that was fun. The kids were excited to be there, and they were all dressed up, and so it was neat to see, all of that. I also attended the school board conference this weekend, and that was a lot of fun to get up and out of the heat. I have my youngest in summer school, so she's also enjoying that breakfast. She comes home exhausted, so we get to take a nap every evening when she gets home. So there's my summertime naps. So, but yeah, so.
Thank you. I also attended 8th grade graduation, and as always, everyone does a spectacular job. No one fell down the stairs. There was no huge high heels, and that's a win. So everybody does a great job, and it's always very organized and pretty efficient. So good job to everyone who gets through all of that. And at this point, Dr. Freeman, we're turning it over to you for your report.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, everybody here. Buenas tardes a todos and good evening. There's been a lot going on, as has been mentioned, not just in the district, but the state and the nation. And I want to start out our focus on some good news. We've had a lot to celebrate in the district this last month. Schools welcome families and friends back to traditional ceremonies, dances, band concerts, field trips to wrap up the year. And I think everybody really appreciated that more now than ever. There was a palpable, renewed sense of appreciation for those opportunities to gather in person, especially as the year came to an end. At Collier, kindergartners were kept busy when mamas and aunties and grandmas all came in for the class for a full spa treatment. And moms were treated to cucumber eye treatments and manicures and hairstyling and makeovers for the kindergartners. And then 8th grade students celebrated their success with a lock-in with fun activities and friendly competition. At Country Place, the kinder students were recognized for leadership and genius. If you're at Country Place, you know what that means. Astoria Vista held special events for their 8th graders, including a field trip to the main event, awards dinners, dance Tunnel of Hope parade. The other grade levels participated in a water day and field day and special STEM projects. Littleton's kinder, 8th grade, and National Junior Honor Society inductees were all celebrated. Grade levels participated in various activities such as daily theme to promote continued learning over the summer, and a project-based learning time capsule to honor Littleton for the next 110 years. At Quinton, students had fun in the sun with water games. Students had, I'm sure they had lots of sunscreen on. Students had celebrations in their classes as well. Pizza was the food of choice, of course, with cupcakes coming in a close second. I'm not sure if every kid would agree with that. Trace Rios celebrated their kinder 8th grade promotions and NJHS ceremonies as well. They had many other less formal celebrations, including spirit days and field activities, class competitions, and some extended teacher appreciation. All of the 8th grade students' promotion ceremonies were full of excitement and very well attended. We had 789 students awarded with promotion certificates, and that's the first time we've done promotion certificates in a long time because we were trying to move away from that graduation idea. But we thought, considering everything that's been going on, it'd be a nice gesture, and I think people really appreciated that. The students leaving our district, for hopefully a good vision of what their futures will be. We wish them the best in all their journeys, education, work, friends and family, community, and service. Truly believing they're all capable of success, and I want to thank our school leaders, our staff, our board members for their participation in the ceremonies. Of course, the teachers for guiding and supporting students achieve this milestone, and it shouldn't go without mention the families that made school a priority and helped them get through the first 9 years. We wish them all well. Because of how late in the year we began to pivot into less restrictive mitigation strategies, our art show resumed this year in a modified form that was school-based instead of at the Avondale Library. We hope to return to that big event in the library again next spring. So even so, we had some artwork that was incredible. Was it still up at Fine Arts when you were over there? Every wall covered with art. It was just amazing. And I think we're going to have the opportunity to purchase some pretty nice pieces. We're still going through the recognition, and I think that will probably be the showcase when we first come back in August about the art show. And we had some really talented kids. So we'd like to be able to choose some of those to add to our permanent and rotating exhibit here at the district. The district chair committee provided a very upbeat atmosphere for the annual recognition at the end of May. We had a combination of in-person and virtual events. We did a video, a very professional, and President Reyes was included in relaying greetings on behalf of the governing board. We didn't, once again, because of pivoting out of mitigation, we didn't try to get all 700 people in one room. So there were gatherings at each site, but then we had recordings of things, so every site got some common messages. I'd like to share one of them now if we can.
Hello, Littleton family. As the end of the 21-22 school year comes to an end, we would like to take a moment to thank everyone for all your hard work and dedication to our school district. As president of the Littleton Governing Board, it is my goal to ensure that we achieve the objective of recognizing that every student is a learner capable of success, no exceptions, that we keep a safe and orderly environment and maintain a highly effective district. We achieve these goals by hiring and retaining a passionate and caring group, such as yourselves. Know that we continue to face the challenges of a lingering pandemic and limited resources and funding. The governing board will continue to support our district by aligning people and programs to match the needs of our growing district. On behalf of the entire governing board, we would like to congratulate all the award winners today, and we are proud to lead such an amazing group of educators and support staff. You are all great examples of what it is to be a leader in learning, caring, and growing.
Okay, there's your next career. That's talent.
No,
But
it was the gentleman that was helping me.
really, that
Scoot back, scoot up.
It's part of the reason I wanted to show it, because I thought the production quality of all of them was just great, with the music in the background, and yeah, that came out really nice, and so we were just picking on you by showing your section.
Oh, perfect.
We're really excited. 87 employees reached their 5-year anniversaries this year. 25 more made it to 10. We had 19 people at 15 years, 5 more staff members passing the 20-year and 25-year milestones, 2 staff members already at 30. And so that's a lot of their life and service to our staff and students here at Littleton. We're proud of them. Westside Impact Teachers and Principals of the Year were recognized again at our, we had 8 retirees this year. Many heartfelt farewell wishes. If you get a chance to see, are any of those videos out on the YouTube channel for retirees, or was that just in-house? They are? So, so they went around and just said, you know, Kathy's retiring. Do you want to say something about her? And they are, some of them, if you watch them, you'll tear up. So, lots of heartfelt messages from staff. People were in tears and laughing out loud, or both at the same time in some cases. Every site recognized treasure hunters for their commitment to kids, the Kids at Hope framework. And so there's a Gold Key support member for outstanding contributions in those roles. They were recognized. There's several district-wide recognitions that we do. So the Distinguished Leadership Award this year went to Miss Robbie Ann Musel. She's Director of Teaching and Learning. Fine Arts Academy was the recipient of the Best Curb Appeal Campus. That's recognition to the custodial crew there. Welcome Center were the deserving winners of the Customer Service Honor. Staff at Collier Business Academy were awarded for their power conservation. And the Golden Spoodle Award is presented to the cafeteria staff at Trace Rio Service Academy. They actually have a pretty elaborate review system for the cafeteria that wins each year. It's probably, you know, the most fierce competition in the school district. Congratulations to all those winners, and we appreciate their hard work. Learning's continuing over the summer with the Wild About Learning program. Our staff worked really hard putting this together, and I think it's a great program. I'm glad to hear it's exhausting as well. Classes began on Monday, June 6th, and they currently have 667 kids. I thought we were over 700 by now. Getting close. So of those, 364 are in K-3 grades, 303 are in grades 4 through 7. Due to the AZ On Track summer camp from the governor's office, we've had the opportunity to do a full day program and service both Littleton students and students from other places in the community who wanted to be part of that afternoon. Students are arriving to the program excited to learn and participate in enrichment activities. They're encouraged in whole and small group instruction in reading and math during the morning sessions in the afternoon. They get a variety of enrichment activities, including coding and art and board games, robotics, cooking, and music. And we've partnered with Read Better, Be Better to offer sessions of their summer program. That's where we match up 3rd grade students with older students and they read together. That program will conclude with a field trip to out of Africa on June 30th. So that'll be fun. Littleton is one of 67 employers valley-wide participating in the Phoenix Youth Rise program. The summer employment program provides employment opportunities for youth ages 16 to 24 to learn general aspects of working in a business during the summer months. And the partnership offers a pathway to building stronger work ethic, making future connections, and of course references when you need those. Littleton currently has 4 participants working at the district office, 2 of which are former students from the Littleton School District. Before being placed, they attend a mandatory 2-day workshop readiness training to ensure they're prepared to enter the workforce, and the internship time frame begins mid-June to the end of July. They actually get paid through this program $15 an hour, and they can't exceed 80 hours a week, 80 hours total, 20 hours a week, but it's still great experience for them. We're honored to be part of the mentoring motivated youth, providing career exposure to next generation. We're also excited that our summer meal service is being offered to our community again this year. May 31st was the first day the summer program started, with breakfast and lunch being served here at Eva's Bistro and also at Quinton STEM Academy. Meals are free to children up through age 18, and they're served every Monday through Thursday. Bus routes began June 6th to deliver free meals to the 8 drop-off locations throughout the district. Our bus drivers are amazing. We had to work on the report earlier this month, so up to midweek last week, the summer feeding program was already nearly 2,500 breakfasts and 2,800 lunches. I'm sure it's more than that by now. And we encourage families to take advantage of that service. Look forward to providing updates and then final counts this summer. We're really happy to be able to do that. We're starting already preparing for in-service for new and returning staff for next year. That's been going on for a while, and we're planning a variety of leadership development opportunities when staff return for the 22-23 school year, beginning with a leadership retreat July 15th. New teachers come in on July 12th. We have a lot to do with them, and then returning teachers start on July 18th. Our plan includes restarting our annual kickoff with a gathering for all staff scheduled again July 26th, the day before school opens, July 27th. We'll be starting the new school year in the district with a new sense of beginning, so our theme for the coming year is "We Were Meant to Shine." It's inspired by the lyrics that we're borrowing from Fly by Avril Lavigne. Is that right? It's one of those young artists, I don't know. As treasure hunters, the path to success is not what we always imagine, and each attempt, teaching, and learning is an opportunity for us to grow. We're growing in enrollment, and that's recovering. We're asking everybody next year to reboot. We want to re-examine everything we do in our systems and routines and make sure we're getting it right as we start the next school year. Our students' time to shine begins on the 27th, like I said, and we'd like to remind parents that attendance to school from the very first day is essential for their growth, their continuous growth. It counts towards funding and learning, and when they miss days, we all have to work harder to make that up, the kids, the teachers, everybody. So please make sure your kids are ready to go and ready to learn on July 27th. Finally, in closing, we want to express our appreciation to Michelle Amaluke and Peter Piper Pizza for their donation of a check of $1,500 to Country Place Leadership Academy. And that's it, Madam President. That's all I have this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman. And before I forget, Dr. Hayde, you can help me out. I just want to shout out, I know they're not here, but to the 2 teachers, Trace Reels, for their 8th grade graduation. I was on stage and I kept looking like, where's the teachers? I kept thinking, like, where are they? There was 2 ladies that walked up, and that was it. And I said, are you the teachers for all these children? And she said, yes. And I said, well, how many students did you have in a room? And it was over 30, correct? 30, 35. And I said, how are you doing? And they were so positive. She said, we're doing great. And I said, you guys should be walking here. Why are you sitting? So please, that was so impressive. There was so many kids in there, and there was those 2 teachers, how they did it. She said that the students were very appreciative, good to them, and that helped, but there was a lot of kids for 2 teachers. So I told them I was going to shout out. They probably thought I forgot. I did not. It was impressive. So,
Madam President, that's just one example. I'm glad you were there, but people pulled together so much. Because we had challenges, and some of them were staff that were sick and staff that left, and
that's what they were telling me.
yeah, we were able to, with position savings, do some compensation of people.
That was good.
But I don't think, their attitudes, I think, would have been great either way. They didn't do it for the money; they did it for
No, you could
for
tell
the
when you
kids.
talked to
Yeah.
them, they had a sense of belonging, and that was theirs. And it was pretty impressive, I have to say, so good job. We're moving on to the consent agenda. So we're moving on.
We do have showcase.
Oh, we do, yes, we do. Well, I have a headache, so let me find it. Here we go. Thank you. So we do have a showcase, Ms. Vanderwater, we'll turn it over to you, please.
Thank you, President Reyes, members of the governing board, Dr. Freeman. I am honored to present to you our program showcase for this evening. Tonight, Mrs. Robbie-Ann Musil, Director of Curriculum and Instruction, will showcase our district's Science and Engineering Fair, Math Challenge, and District Spelling Bee. Our organization facilitated and participated in 3 successful events, and we have many students to celebrate. Tonight, we welcome Mrs. Robbie-Ann Musil.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Freeman, and executive team. Thank you for this opportunity to share some of our academic events that Littleton ESD students had the opportunity to participate in. As Ms. Vandewater said, I'll be highlighting our spelling bee, our science and engineering fair, and our math challenge. So our spelling bee this year was held on Thursday, January 13th, and all 8 Littleton ESD schools held their school spelling bees prior to this. And their first place winners came here and participated in the district spelling bee. The spelling bee went 8 rounds, and the winning word was avenue. Our first and our second place winners participated in the regional spelling bee, which was held on February 12th at Yonker High School. Our first place winner was Mireille Rascon, and she's a 7th grade student at Estrella Vista STEM Academy for engineering. And our second place student is Agamavir Singh, a 6th grade student at Fine Arts Academy. Congratulations to both of these students. Our Science and Engineering Fair was held virtually this year because of mitigation, and it was held on Friday, February 4th. We had a team of judges consisting of staff, community members, and students. They used a rubric to determine our district winners. We had top 6 projects from our science fair that were able to represent our district in the Westside Impact Science and Engineering Fair, held on February 11th and 12th. 5 of those 6 projects that competed in the Westside Impact Fair received an award, and 3 of them qualified for the state competition. I'll highlight these accomplishments as I go through the next few slides. Our 3rd and 4th grade district winners were the Inclusion Playground from Quinton STEM Academy for Health Sciences and Suspension Bridge from Littleton STEM Academy for Computer Sciences. Both of these projects also placed in the Westside Impact. Inclusion Playground received 1st place, and the Suspension Bridge placed 2nd. Our 5th and 6th grade winners were Battery Powered Car from Tres Rios Service Academy, Crystal Growth from Collier Business Academy for Financial Literacy, and Ice Melting for Quinton STEM Academy for Health Sciences. 2 of these placed in the Westside Impact. Battery Powered Car received 1st place, and Ice Melting placed 3rd. Both of these projects also qualified for the Arizona Science and Engineering Fair as well. Our 7th and 8th grade district winner was Magnetic Tube from Quinton STEM Academy for Health Sciences. This project placed 3rd in the Westside Impact Science and Engineering Fair and also qualified for the Arizona Science and Engineering Fair. Congratulations to these teams. The last event I'd like to highlight is our Math Challenge. We held this virtually as well because of mitigation, and it was held on 2 days, Thursday, March 10th and Friday, March 11th. Teams of students competed against each other in 2 rounds that consisted of math problem solving, and then math trivia. We have 3 grade bands that compete, 3rd and 4th, 5th and 6th, 7th and 8th. The Westside Impact Math Challenge was not held this year because of mitigation, and so I will just be highlighting our district winners today. Our 3rd and 4th grade winners, 1st place was Estrella Vista STEM Academy for engineering. 2nd place was Country Place Leadership Academy, and 3rd place was Fine Arts Academy. You're gonna see a trend in our 1st place winner as I move to 5th and 6th grade. We had Estrella Vista STEM Academy for engineering place 1st. 2nd place was Country Place Leadership Academy, and 3rd place was Collier Business Academy for financial literacy. 6th and 8th grade winners. Again, Estrella Vista STEM Academy took 1st place. 2nd place was Collier Business Academy for financial literacy, and 3rd place was Country Place Leadership Academy. Congratulations to these teams and the sponsors that helped them prepare. We now have a short video to help highlight these events from this year.
goes to Estrella Vista.
Here's the motor, attach it to these, then it goes. And here we put this so the wheels didn't come off. Right here is 2 slides, and when you turn around to this side, you see a corkscrew that you can either go up or down.
It was the easiest one, and it is one of the most famous bridges in the world.
Thank you again for the opportunity to share these accomplishments with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Musil.
So at this time, I understand there is no call to the public, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there any item that the board wishes to have pulled from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve or disapprove the items on the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
There is a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hearing no, the motion passes. With that, we're going to move on to item 10, and it looks like, Mr. French, you're in charge here.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the governing board, Dr. Freeman, and Littleton community. This evening, I will be proposing an expenditure budget for fiscal year 22-23. What I'd like to start with is reviewing with the board a budget timeline. This is the timeline that we work off. There are many dates and milestones that the district adheres to when it comes to the budget. We begin to look at the budget in the spring in preparation to bring a proposed budget to the board in June. This is followed by a public hearing and a budget adoption in July. This year, since as of this presentation, the legislature has not passed a budget for fiscal year 23, the Auditor General's Office, who creates and distributes budget forms for school districts, has announced that districts will have the opportunity to revise their budget prior to September 15th of 2022, and any changes to the adopted budget due to changes in law will be retroactive to the beginning of the school year. In a typical year, the first revision would happen in December if necessary. Other dates to note on this timeline include October of 22, which is when the tax bill will be mailed to individuals and businesses within the district boundaries, which include primary and secondary tax rates, as we'll discuss later in this presentation. The district's last opportunity to revise the budget is in May, and the annual financial report, which is a report on the budget expenditures, is due October. As I mentioned on the last slide, the legislature has not passed a budget for fiscal year 23. We have had many bills floating around the legislature supporting increased funding for schools, and I will be proposing a budget tonight with some of those assumptions. Our first estimate is an increase of 156.7 ADM for fiscal year 23. That's approximately 3% increase in student enrollment. The district has seen a steady enrollment trend this year and saw a strong enrollment push towards the end of the school year. The district is seeing a higher than normal enrollment for kindergarten at this point in the year as well. We are expecting, one thing that we do know is we are expecting a 2% increase in the base level for inflation funding. That amount is required by law, so that is the minimum amount that they can provide to the school districts. We are expecting to see that somewhere in the budget. That equates to approximately $87.81 per weighted ADM. The base support level is extremely important to the budget formula. It will be multiplied by the weighted ADM to determine the general budget limit. We know that inflation ran 8.3% from July of 21 to April, or April of 21 to April of 22, but we, like I had mentioned, we are expecting a budget to be passed with the least amount of inflation funding as required by law, which is 2%. The district is also proposing this budget to include an additional $500 million to the base support level, which is being discussed at the legislature. This would add an additional $320.25 per weighted ADM to the base support level and would be a step in the right direction to make Arizona more competitive with other states when it comes to funding. We're also expecting the transportation support level to increase for Littleton from $2.27 a mile to $2.48 a mile. This amount is multiplied by the number of approved route miles driven by our transportation department and is ultimately rolled into the M&O budget to support salaries and supplies like fuel. We're also expecting an increase to the Group B sped weight, which will have a positive impact on our final M&O budget number. Reviewing our M&O budget calculations, the base support level and transportation revenue control limit are added together to get a revenue control limit of approximately $36.7 million. M&O override is going to be $5.29 million, which is an increase of $470,000 from the prior year. We are currently estimating carry forward from FY22 of $4.4 million. This number can still be a bit fluid with orders coming in the last week of June. There is a transfer to the Energy Savings Fund of $199,000. That is the same as the prior 3 years, which is part of the Energy Conservation Management Program that the district has, as well as approximately $352,000 of additional funds from Prop 123. This provides the FY23 general budget limit of $46.6 million. This is an increase of approximately $6.83 million from our last revised budget in fiscal year 22. A review of our district's assessed value history starts at 2013 all the way up to 2022. That you can see in 2014 through 2016, a moderate increase in property values with exceptional growth from 2017 to 2021. Growth in the primary assessed value in 2022 was 12.38%, the highest in the last 10 years. This is a piece that Stiefel had gone over with us when we were selling the bonds. They had talked to us a little bit about assessed value, some of the agricultural land being reclassified and repurposed into industrial and residential, which allowed for a large assessed value for the district. Annual growth on existing property is limited to 5% annually. However, growth from reclassification of property and construction is not limited. This upswing in value is credited to new construction in the district and the conversion of vacant land to residential property. With a higher number of building permits in Avondale as expected, the district will continue to see strong assessed value growth in the next few years as well. This slide gives us a 10-year look back at tax rates for the district. Using preliminary calculations, the district is estimating a tax rate for fiscal year 23 of 5.2285, which is a decrease of almost 24 cents, 23.74 cents from last year. This decreased tax rate is due largely to the very strong growth in the assessed value from the last slide. Truth in taxation statutes deals with the amount of money is levied in adjacent ways. This is funded on the primary tax rate and is authorized by the governing board. Littleton has set a levy for adjacent ways of $800,000 in the fiscal 23 budget. A truth and taxation notice will be posted and a hearing will take place with the adopted budget in July. We use adjacent ways to pay for items like half streets on our new school sites. We use a lot of adjacent ways monies to pay for the half streets of the Alomar project, as well as the fire lanes for the Alomar project. Adjacent ways is used for ingress and egress on properties, so we use them for like I mentioned, fire lanes for paving. So district needs to levy some additional funds so we can continue projects to keep our school sites safe. Our publication for Truth and Taxation requires the district to post a levy amount for a $100,000 home with a levy and without. Without the levy, the rate would be zero, and with the levy on a $100,000 home, the rate would be $25.80. This was calculated into the combined tax rate on the previous slide and still accounts for the 23.74 cent decrease in the overall district tax rate. At this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board has about the adopted or the proposed budget.
Is there any questions? At that point, I'll need a motion.
I move that the governing board adopt the proposed expenditure budget for fiscal year 22-23 as presented.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion will pass. Moving on to number 11.
Thank you, President Reyes, members of the governing board, Dr. Freeman, Littleton community. Based on that proposed budget, we would also like to review with the board proposed raises for fiscal year 23. The district is proposing a salary increase similar to what was approved last year. We're recommending a modest raise based on the 2% inflation funding required by law. This raise would range from 1.25% for certified and admin to 1.75% for classified staff. We're proposing a slightly higher increase for classified staff since they were not eligible for some of the increases already provided to certified staff, including the additional $450 signing, contract signing incentive that the board approved, as well as the increased compensation through classroom site fund that was approved at a prior meeting. The raise structure would cost the budget $361,000, which include the salary and benefits and cost to the district. The district is also proposing a pandemic and inflation relief stipend for all returning staff. This stipend would be paid to staff based on their FTE and would total $650 paid, which would total $650. It would be split up, paid twice during the school year. At this moment, the district is recommending paying the stipend in August and in February. The district has budgeted the stipend from ESSER funds. After reconciling prior budgeted items and actual expenditures, we realized that this was possible to do without reducing the programs to be paid from ESSER that administration had already reviewed with the board. As of now, the ESSER portion of the increase would be a one-time amount. This stipend is estimated to cost approximately $355,000. There have been many incremental changes the district has made over the last couple of months to increase compensation for our staff. If you remember back to this time of year, the board approved a one-time ESSER stipend that was equal to 1.25% of an employee's base pay, which cost the district approximately $385,000. The district asked the board to move this one-time stipend into the employee's base pay at a February meeting, and the board had approved that. This brings the total sustainable salary increase to $747,000, which is 2.5% for certified and admin and 3% for classified. Another item that staff will not see directly in their paycheck, but is another benefit provided by the district, was the district's ability to absorb the entire PM increase in medical benefits. This was reviewed with the board in February and was an approximately $700 increase to contribution annually per employee. All of these changes added together equals an additional $1.4 million added to employee benefits and salaries and benefits. Lastly, administration would like to ask the board to approve additional raises to staff if the legislature approves a budget over the 2% required inflation funding. Even though the district expects funds above the required funding from the state, we don't know how much that might be yet. During the budget proposal presentation, the district asked the board to adopt a budget with an additional $500 million to the base support level based on negotiations happening at the state. If additional funds become available to the base support level, the district would like to provide staff with a 0.75% raise for every 1% above the minimum that the state provides. This would allow the district to provide those increases to employee contracts once the state's budget is approved and would still leave money in the budget for increases in supply and utility costs. I know that might have been a little confusing, so I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Well, I think too it's important, we're proposing a budget that you voted on. We'll adopt that budget, but remember that's based on the Auditor General's go ahead and use the old forms. This will actually show up in the September budget when we do the revising. So there is a little bit of us marking time while we wait for the legislature.
And if I understood it, 0.75 if, depending at the funds, based on legislation, of 1% above minimum, is that what you said?
So-
I don't know what that means at all.
2% we already did. is the
Okay.
minimum.
Gotcha,
So
okay.
if they give us 3, it goes up 1.
I gotcha. Okay, I wasn't sure where the minimum was, but that makes sense. Okay. Questions? All right. Did you have anything else, sir?
No, I don't have anything else unless the board has anything for me.
Nope,
Do you have a form of a motion?
he does. So at this point, if there's no more questions, we'll need a motion.
I move the governing board approve salary raises for this, for staff for the fiscal year 2022, 2023.
I'll second.
Thank you. I have a first and a second. Any opposed? Hearing none, may I have a roll call? A motion? We had that, and we had a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. All right, we're moving on to you again, sir.
Thank you, President Reyes. This item, what we thought we'd do is bring information to the board and discuss the developer donation agreement that the district currently has in place that we use with developers. What we did is we gathered information from, we tried to gather information from surrounding districts to see what they did as well, to see if we're in line. I know that this has been a conversation over the last couple of board meetings about the fees that we're being assessed from the city of Avondale and what that may look like for the district as far as possibly revising this agreement with our developers to capture some of those fees that we're being assessed. So if you look on the screen, this is what the board has adopted for Littleton, the developer donation agreement for Littleton. You can see that we have it based on square footage of the dwelling, and it ranges anywhere from $200 for anything less than 550 square feet all the way up to $1,000 for anything above 2,100 square feet. If we scroll down a little bit, Jim, we have some of the information that we got from surrounding districts. We spoke with Avondale Elementary, which actually uses the same rate structure as Littleton. Buckeye L and Buckeye Union have a joint agreement where they have developers pay $2,000 for single-family detached, so they don't base it on square footage, and that's split between the two districts, with Buckeye L receiving the majority of it, $1,300, and Buckeye Union at $700. They had also broken it up into, so that was for detached homes. They have attached units where they would have $600 for the agreement. Also, again, split up between the elementary district for $390 and the Union district for $210. Apartments would be the same structure. And then $300 per studio or one bedrooms, with $195 of that going to Buckeye L and $105 to Buckeye Union. Dysart is a unified district, and they have $1,750 per house, $1,300 per condo, and $700 per apartment. So if we scroll down a little bit more, you can see the math that was done based on the fees that are due to the city of Avondale based on the Alomar project. Would essentially increase the cost per residence to the district by $130. We wanted to have a discussion with the board to see if the board felt it was prudent for the district to go back and possibly revise our donation agreement and bring it back to the board in July, or if the board felt comfortable with where the donation agreement was now.
Thank you. This is a discussion item only, so I'll open it up for conversation. But before I do, I want to publicly let people know that Dr. Freeman did go to a council meeting, and address the council asking for a review of this rate structure, and did a very good job presenting information. I haven't heard, so I don't think we're going to get any rate relief, but they heard Dr. Freeman, and I was there in support of Dr. Freeman, and I'm glad we did it. We need to stand up for what we believe in, and Dr. Freeman did a good job with that. So thank you, Dr. Freeman. That's right. So is there discussion? Questions about the fees, thoughts about assessing them? I personally think it's great. I mean, we can't afford to be paying, you know, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 without finding a way to pass that cost on. So I'm perfectly fine with revising it and going back for, you know, different donation agreements. Yes.
Are developers required to pay this?
Madam President, Ms. Sosnick, so the way municipalities work it is people have to be permitted for construction, and then that construction is supervised by whatever the authority is, the city or the county, to make sure that it meets minimum standards. So we've probably all heard the term green tag, red tag. So when you hook into the water main, you're actually, you know, drilling right into the city's property, and that connection and the valves and the meters that go with it, they want to make sure are done correctly, because they're going to bill you for water later and sewer and all of those things. So while that trench is still open, somebody from the authorizing government entity, county or city, comes and makes sure that it's going to work and it's going to be fine. Before that, you turn in drawings that show them exactly what you're going to do. And before that, they're going to review all the other things you need to do. So there's a development office in each of these governing authorities. It's a little different if you're out, you know, across the river and you have a well and you have your own septic and you have your own. But for these, because they go through this other government agency to help fund the agency, the waterworks and those kind of things, cities have the authority to add fees for those services. So each city and county is going to be different, and some of the expectations are different. So Maricopa County has dust and pollution concerns, and Coconino County has weather concerns. So the things that they look at are going to be different. And you can't get a permit to build, usually in that county or municipality, until you've gone through that process. And so to get through the process, you have to pay. The issue we had with the city is they're treating us like a developer who can make money and profit on the work they're doing. We're not. We're a subdivision of government. And so we researched some of the founding documents and things that they used, and they had a rationale. We just didn't agree with it. The reason that we might do an impact fee per residence is that when we build a new school, it's usually for new people. If we take it out of our bond fund, the cost of financing that is spread out over everybody in the community. So right now, all of the taxpayers of Littleton are picking up the tab, and if we have a 20-year loan on that bond, some portion of that, just like a $411,000 mortgage on a 20-year mortgage, is being paid by everybody. The case we made when we went to council is there was an assumption that 43% of the occupants were non-residents of an elementary school, which we didn't agree with, and so we've asked for some consideration. So there's two ways to do it, is to continue to finance and fund it through bonds, to pay it on a per residence basis for where the impact is coming from new people that need a new school, and the other is to appeal to council to see if they can revise the rate. So the rates are not set by law. The authority to set the rate is set by law.
Okay, I guess my question is, and maybe I'm wrong in knowing what we're discussing here, but we're discussing possibly changing our developer donation agreement, right?
Madam President, Ms. Sosnick, one of the ideas, and the reason we're not voting tonight, is if there's no revision or reduction in fees from the city, we're going to pay the bill so we can build the school, because they won't come out and green tag our plumbing if we don't. And then the question is, would we take our current rate structure and add $130 to it so that new people buying new residents are contributing to the cost of building the school? Since we're doing that, do you want to look at the whole rate structure and make sure it's comparable, because those are pre-COVID, pre-inflation numbers. They're flat numbers. They're not a percent of the value of the house or the construction or anything. So that was one broader question we had. The other is we can continue to finance it, you know, through bonds and overrides as part of the capital budget. So it's intended to be a broad discussion.
Right, okay. So my question is, we have this agreement where currently, if I'm a developer and I build a 1,400 square foot home, the district is asking me to donate $800. Are developers required to donate that $800, or can they ignore that?
Our ability to capture a donation agreement has to do with our cooperation with that authority that approves the permitting. So we have kind of off and on success with Phoenix, and we have pretty good success with Avondale as far as allowing a developer to get through the platting and permitting process without an agreement. Avondale is pretty strict on, and their impact fees are significant. So ours are a tiny, minor portion of the cost of doing business for developers. City of Phoenix, depending on the project and the impact and the communication with whoever is in the Estrella precinct area and that development group, I think maybe we get about half of that. And I think sometimes that's when the city has a concern that they relay it to us to make sure that we're involved in. So there is some changing of zoning happening between 107th and 99th. And you'll see some of those signs there. And that's when we're more likely to be involved with the city of Phoenix.
I mean, to a certain extent, I guess my concern is that we can go in and change, if we decide to change our structure here and our donation agreement, will it solve the problem? I don't know if, depending where we're building the school, it's going to matter. You know what I mean? So I guess my gut right now is saying that I don't know if while I'm okay doing this, I don't know if it's going to solve our problem.
Madam President, members of the board. So when they ask us for an impact for a certain number of homes being built, we use a mathematical formula, which is the number of students expected on average to come from that home times the number of homes, and that gives us a student number. If we divide that by 27, that gives us a teacher number. We take the teacher number times the average teacher salary, and that gives us an impact per classroom and the cost of staffing it. Then we take desk, chairs, books, and computers, a capital furniture and equipment number, and take it times the number of kids, and that gives us a startup for the stuff that goes in the room capital number. Then we take the cost per square foot for the number of rooms from the building we just built, which you know to be about $330 a square foot. So the SFB uses either 90 square feet per pupil times 330, and that ends up with an impact somewhere in the neighborhood of a couple $1 million. I know Ada fills them out now. I just do the formula. And then we ask for a few $100s per unit, and that idea is that it is additional capital money that kind of bridges us over in the time between the school we have now and the schools we're going to need. But it's maybe 10% of the true impact, depending on. So the point we're trying to make to the city and the developers, the cost to fully build out staff and put in equipment is far greater to the school district than anything we're asking for impact fees. And that's really just to help us build that bridge between when schools are getting crowded and we're able to build another one. So there's really not any problem solving. It's a little bit of problem helping. But these fees don't in any way approach the true cost of adding the number of students that would come from any subdivision or development. So when you ask that question, it's kind of a long, nebulous answer to these are intended to help, but they build a bridge, but they don't solve anything. Then they provide some relief for us when we're growing faster than our budget and those kind of things. Does that make sense? Even though I know it wasn't what you're looking for, but
it does make sense, and I would agree that reevaluating our numbers in a post-COVID inflation increase in building type. I agree that we should do that. And but I just don't know if, I guess in my mind, I'm looking at paying these impact fees to the city of Avondale is taking stuff away from the students of Littleton, and that's the problem for me. Like, and that's what I want to solve, and maybe we can't solve it, and we just have to kind of suck it up, I guess. But that's the problem that I want to try to find a solution for.
The timing never matches. We're not going to fix that.
I think the thing we looked at is we're being assessed $400 an impact fee, a significant impact fee. Now, we're paying that. That has to come from somewhere, right? And you're right, it comes from children. And then we turn around and we put this back in the bond and we charge the community again. So now we're double dipping the community. If they actually understood how this worked, I don't think it would be received too well. Because we pay Avondale, then we're turned around and assessed on our home, which has also got a bond assessment for a new school. So we are double dipping, and it's just not logical. And so when Dr. Freeman researched the definitions, which one would think it came out of older MAG documents where they look to have the kind of the guidance of some generalized statements from each, it is really quite interesting how they came up with the formula and not considering that actually that formula is paid maybe two, maybe three times over. It's just people don't know it. So it does take money from students, takes money from citizens, not once, but at least twice. So I do think there has to be something done. I don't know what the magic thing is. I don't know what the magic number is. But if you look at the homework that was done on the surrounding districts, there must be a reason other districts are doing it. Because they also face the challenges we do of coming up with that extra almost $500,000. That's a lot of money you're taking away from things that could be used. So,
and Buckeye and Dykes are both growing districts.
Yes.
I mean, so I do want to make clear why we're having this discussion, and the school that we're talking about is in Alomar.
Right.
We don't have any kind of dispute or issue with Brookfield or Alomar. We've been working collaboratively with them on the land, on the roads next to the land. We work with them a lot in the placement of the school and the design, and so that wasn't our issue. It is really for us the problem that the city will hold our permits until we've got some agreement with them. What I understand is it's a function of zoning and authority. The permits really become kind of the lever that they use, but the permits themselves aren't the cause of the impact fee. It's all of the planning and zoning and those kind of things that happen. So for those who are in the audience who may be listening, the only part of the fee that we took issue with was the city's part. And actually, I think because after we do the estimate, Mr. French's office handles the agreements, and I think most of the developers have been very conscientious about understanding they're making an impact and working with us. Once we get them into the stream of things, that community has been fine. We just never understood why, if it's our kids, whether they're in their house or in their school, that they're not using really any more water. They're not using water at home and at school because they're only one place at a time. How they justify that. So I'm sorry, Madam President. I just wanted, for people who are listening, make sure they knew what our issue was.
So I'm not sure, did you get what you needed to, did you get the direction or whatever you were looking for?
Well, we did the comparison, so I think we are kind of looking for some indication of the board. We can research it further. I think maybe give the city an opportunity to have a hearing and to hear us maybe before we decide what to do, and not necessarily bring this back in July, but maybe August or some other time. It doesn't need to be timed with the fiscal year. It's just going to be whenever we do take action, it would be any development going forward from that point.
I think if nothing else, it'd be interesting when you sit with Avondale to show them some fee base we've come up with. If nothing else, it sends a signal that we're serious. And I mean, how would they like to go to Alomar and go, oh, by the way, we're going to put this in the assessment fee. So I'm all for showing it, and we'll see what they say and you know, what the criteria was. So I'm okay with that. Others? Any other thoughts? Amy?
I agree with you guys. I'm all for showing it and trying to work more with the city of Avondale to try to understand what they're doing, and if, you know, letting more people understand what's going on. And kind of like what Kathy has said, that the citizens and community of Avondale is being double dipped or triple dipped, whatever that is, to pay for this. So I'm very open to that.
Sounds like your direction is to kind of do your homework, make sure the numbers are good, and then let Avondale know this is kind of what we're considering, and it'd be interesting to see their response, right? It'd be, if nothing else, you've showed your hand that it is important to us, so I think it's worthwhile.
Yeah, I think the next step is to hear from them, and then based
Yeah.
on that, we can come back
With,
and discussion of the board and what we hear back from the city of Avondale.
I agree.
And like I said, there's not a hurry to do this. We don't have to do it on a fiscal year, you know, newspaper, auditor general thing. It's entirely at the discretion of the board, you know, at any time. So I'd like to be deliberate about it, and part of the reason we had the discussion.
Thank you. So that is a discussion item only. We're moving on to 13, which is an action item, and that goes to Ms. Garrison.
Madam President, Governing Board, I'm excited tonight to bring you a recommendation for the name of our next school. A committee convened that consisted of Alomar residents, representation from the land developer and the homeowners association, as well as staff members to weigh in on this decision. I'm going to share part of the presentation used during that meeting to help explain the process and the rationale for our recommendation. We began the meeting with an introduction to the existing academies and how our new academy that you are currently contemplating will be a great complement to our offerings. Part of the discussion was also about how the name of the school is the first thing in a list of things that help a school develop an identity. Focus, mascot, and colors will all be a part of the next steps, and we shared some fun ideas tied to the history of that land that could help the planning principal and the students in the future. We also talked about how school choice works in our district so that the participants would understand. We talked about the groundbreaking event and the governing board discussion around providing program that would mean this new academy will offer a more individualized, accelerated curriculum, which would complement our current offerings, and we noted that members of the Lakin family were present. We reviewed the governing board policy that guides how we select names for our schools. The policy is on the screen to remind all how we make these important decisions, and some examples were shared. For people here and those listening on the outside, some interesting things we talked about. First of all, the district was named after Dr. Little, as you may or may not know. He was a dentist who settled on the west corner of 115th Avenue and Buckeye Road. That's what we remember it as, right, Mrs. Reyes? 115th Avenue, yep. Where Littleton School still exists today. Collier Elementary School was built on Thayer and Pearl Collier's farm, and Thayer served on the board for 54 years. Quinton was named after Dr. Quinton Aycock, who became superintendent in 1964 following Mr. Underdown's death. Seeing a pattern here? And he served in the position for nearly 30 years. Tres Rios was named after 3 rivers that connect in the area. Anyone? Anyone? River? Agua Fria? Salt?
And Gila.
You got it. That is correct. Nice. Awesome. So, what came from that discussion was a unanimous decision to honor the Lakin family. The Lakin Ranch and farmland, where the new school is going up, has been in the Lakin family for nearly 100 years. Chuck's father, Lloyd Lakin, purchased the land for duck hunting. This land would later become the main farm and ranch of the Lakin Cattle Company. Chuck and Maxine Lakin are both legendary historical figures that have made significant contributions to agriculture, education, community, preservation, and business in Arizona and beyond. The Lakins are longtime residents whose commitment to family, community, education, and philanthropy have greatly affected economic development. It was not hard to find information about them as we went digging, and I'd like to share a few highlights about why the committee members felt so strongly about using their name on the new school. Chuck Lakin was a remarkable man who touched countless lives in Arizona, the Southwest, and the nation. He was a horseman, cattleman, farmer, innovator, and author who was involved in Arizona agriculture nearly his entire life. As if that wasn't enough, he was also a veteran. Just short of graduation from the University of Arizona, he selflessly enlisted in the U.S. Army to join American forces in World War II. He was wounded in action and was awarded the Purple Heart for his service and the Presidential Unit Citation for his extraordinary heroism in action. Following his military discharge, Chuck worked for his dad at the Lakin Cattle Company, where he used his educational background from the College of Agriculture to grow and manage his cattle. He also started breeding, raising, and training quarter horses and mules. He pioneered the development of pelletized horse feeds, which is still used today, and resulted in the creation of the Lakin Milling Company. In case you were wondering about his commitment to education, he did finish that degree 63 years later at the age of 84. He is an Avondale business pioneer, served as a Grand Marshal for the Billy Moore Days, was a co-founder and president of the Estrella Rotary Club in Avondale. He donated land and built the Lloyd Lakin Park and Community Center in Las Vegas, and oh yeah, he published a book. Those were some of the highlights about Chuck that we learned about. Now, allow me to talk a little bit about Maxine. Maxine Lakin was born in 1922 and is most likely listening tonight. She is a lifelong advocate of education, parks, recreation, ranching, and preservation. She graduated from the University of Arizona with a BA in education and was a high school teacher in Florence, Arizona. Maxine was elected to the Phoenix Union High School Board of Education, where she served as the first female president. She was appointed to the Governor's Commission on the Arizona Environment, where she served for over 20 years and was instrumental in the creation of Harmony Farms at the Phoenix Zoo. Maxine also led the efforts to establish the Phoenix Mountain Preserves, protecting land for aesthetics, beauty, and recreational use. She is a relentless civic leader, philanthropist, and volunteer who has received numerous honors throughout her life. She continues to dutifully serve our community today. Yes, she is still active in many of the organizations she committed to shaping many years ago. She is a highly decorated woman, and some of her awards include the Community Council Distinguished Service Award, Cox Conserves Heroes National Environmental Award, National Recreation and Parks Association Volunteer Award, Phoenix Ad Club Woman of the Year, and Who's Who in American Women. I could go on, but I will conclude by noting they received additional awards together. So I gave you some of the things that they got as individuals. The committee shared even more recent stories about how involved this family, their friends, and their staff have been involved in the development of the land that's happening today. I left the discussion energized and in awe of this remarkable family and what they have done for this community. As most of you know, I've been here for more than 3 decades, and I didn't realize the reach of this amazing family. On behalf of the administration and the committee members who serve, I respectfully recommend that our next academy be named the Lakin Prep Academy.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Questions, comments?
It's not a question. And I did not know that this was coming up until I looked at this, but as someone who, Mr. Lakin spent every Tuesday afternoon with me for my 4 years of high school, because he sponsored a club at Tallison High School. And I joined the club my freshman year, and my senior year I was president. I can tell you from personal, he was committed to education and committed to this community and committed to volunteering. The club that he helped sponsor through the Estrella Mountain Rotary was the Interact Club, which commits to volunteering and takes high school students and gives them opportunities to volunteer in the community and support. So I'm personally very excited about possibly naming this school Lincoln Prep.
Sarah, comment?
I just think it's an awesome opportunity to continue with that tradition of, keeping it within the community. We have, Littleton, Underdown, Quinton. It keeps Littleton unique, so.
And I would agree, also as someone who's lived here for many, many, many years, and not far from actually Lincoln themselves. I was in 7th grade, and I didn't know anything, but I knew Lincoln. And don't ask me why or how come. I never rode horses, and I wasn't into cows, but they held such a prestigious part of the community. You just knew. So I think it's very fitting, and if you've been here or if you haven't been here long, it is great to be able to give this legacy to someone or to their family who truly deserves it and has made an impact to our city. So thank you if you're listening. We greatly appreciate everything you've done for education, for the community, and certainly your recognition goes on and on, obviously. So I think with that, we have an action item on that.
I move that the governing board approve Lincoln Prep Academy as the name for school number 10.
I'll second that.
We do have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Hearing that, motion will pass. Congratulations. All right, we're moving on to number 14, Dr. Haid.
Well, that's a hard one to follow. However, in December, the board approved a pilot for teachers to be compensated when there were classes that needed to be split due to the lack of an available sub or an unanticipated vacancy. As promised, we have information on the impact of the class split prep loss plan, and it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Martin Diaz, our Human Resources Director, who managed the pilot and gathered the information being presented tonight. Mr. Diaz.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Freeman and executive team, thank you for giving me the opportunity to present this update to the class split and prep loss plan. Tonight, I will be discussing the plan's implementation, application, and the compensation results. The implementation of the plan contained 3 stages. In the development stage, our primary focus was to determine how to compensate teachers. We examined our current system and those of other districts to determine what would work best. We then created a share earning process for tracking teacher coverage throughout the semester and applied it to a system that could be accessed by stakeholders within the plan. As presented in the initial proposal of this plan, teachers would earn parts or entire shares for taking on a split class or covering a class during their prep time. We collaborated with school administrators responsible for managing attendance at their site to discuss the best ways to implement a plan that would be efficient, accurate, and consistent. Making the plan easy for administrators to use and not adding additional tasks to their day was important. We created a tracking sheet that calculated the data for them, so they would only have to gather and enter the information. We increased the level of accuracy by requiring both school and district administration to review and reconcile the data together. We also gave teachers the ability to view the tracking form containing their coverage. We ensured the plan would be followed consistently by implementing procedures and strict expectations that aligned with the plan. Lastly, communication on how the plan would be implemented was sent out to all teachers. Teachers were provided full details of the plan and given view access to the tracking forms administration would use at each of the schools. Here are examples of the tracking systems we used and shared with administrators and teachers at individual campuses. In them, you can see how the various types of coverages, class splits, prep losses, and early release days were documented. The form was used daily by the site administrators overseeing attendance and reconciled at the end of every week. The HR office would review these forms for accuracy, both daily and at the end of the week, before entering the data into our teacher share tracking form, where all the earned shares were calculated. As you could see, there are 3 different examples from one form in the slide. The form example on the left side was used to calculate the split plan for a full day. The one in the middle was used to calculate a half day, or what would be considered an early release day for teachers and students. And the one on the far right was used to track the prep loss usage of teachers during their prep period. Next, I would like to share data that supports the purpose of the split plan and the prep loss plan, the split and prep loss plan. The high rate of unfilled absences by substitutes created the need for teachers to split classes or cover a class during their prep period. An increase of 687 absences over the previous semester heightened that problem. The combination of ESI and permanent substitutes provided relief, but the need for our teachers to support absence coverage remained high. Our data indicates that 60% of teacher absences were called in the night before or the day of the absence, further decreasing the possibility of a substitute covering a class to 10%. As you can see here in the review of the second semester attendance data, we had 1,896 absences that required a substitute. We were able to fill 838 absences, of those absences with a permanent substitute or an ESI substitute. The 1,030 teacher absences that were not covered by a substitute were covered through the split or prep loss coverage. It's important to note also that the board-approved class size overage plan was applied to circumstances that met the requirements set forth by the plan. Next slide, please. Here you can see the options for coverage, the split and prep loss plan, and class size overage plan. On the left are the formulas we use to calculate earned shares through the split and prep loss plan. We were able to develop a formula that would accurately track the portion of a share that a teacher would earn according to the way an unfilled class was split or covered by way of prep loss. In addition, several long-term unfilled absences allowed for the class size overage plan that you see on the right to be used in place of the split and prep loss plan. Next, please. Of the allotted $90,000 set aside for substitute funds for the second semester, a balance of $37,600 remained and was available for the teacher compensation plan. Of the 300 eligible teachers, 258 are scheduled to receive compensation under the class split and prep loss plan. The payout for teachers ranged from $0 to $1,353 under the plan. A total of 766 shares valued at $49.68 each were earned by teachers. Based on this, Madam President and members of the board, the administration is recommending that we continue the plan for the 2022-2023 school year using the same methodology to calculate the number of shares earned. The budget associated with this plan will be similar to the one used this year. However, we are working with Mr. French on next year's budget. I'd like to move on to the slide where I could take any questions or comments.
I'll open up the floor for questions, comments.
I just want to thank you and the rest of the Littleton team that came up with this plan as a way of trying to value teachers' time. I lost many of my preps this past year trying to cover for subs, and I unfortunately will not get given back any compensation for that time. So I appreciate all the work that went into try to figure this out. I'm sure many hours were spent looking at that spreadsheet and figuring out by administration and HR. So I just want to thank you for your hard work.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to echo Amy's comments. I know it was a very challenging school year, and you know, a lot of teachers did lose a lot of prep and planning time. I know my department as well, you know, we cover our department internally because we have our special education classes that are more unique. So I know it's very tedious and it's very time consuming, and so thank you for all of your time and effort in working on this plan.
Thank you, and you're welcome.
I have questions. So,
Yes.
thank you. There's no doubt giving up time for prepping and other things is a hardship for everyone, so thank you for the study. My question goes back to the absenteeism rate in general. I mean, I don't know what to base it on. If I did a survey of other districts, I don't know if this number of absenteeisms are 6% of the district.
1,800 days, when you take the number of teachers times 90 days.
And that's what I was trying to figure out.
6%,
6%. So I don't know if 6% is good, bad, or indifferent. I'd look to Dr. Haid, maybe would know that more than I do. To me, it seems high, but I don't have anything to measure it against. Do you know, Dr. Haid?
Madam President, members of the board, actually in the next presentation, we're going to go in depth to absenteeism and our overall district substitute plan.
Perfect.
So that will probably answer many of your questions.
Okay, so then I'm going to wait and not waste anyone's time till I can see that presentation. It may answer the majority. I just had one other question, and what is our, you don't have to give me all the chapter, but what's the general policy of calling in the night before? I get that happens. I'd be curious how many times that happens and what's done about it if it's a person of concern. What's the general policy?
So for illnesses, I'm sorry, Madam President, for illnesses, typically the teacher has, or the staff member has 30 minutes before the start of the professional day to call in.
30
That is
minutes?
For an illness, correct. Sometimes things arise in the morning, we understand that, and teachers are afforded that option. For personal days, there is a 4-day requirement that we have, where we expect our staff to request that time ahead of time, so that we can plan according. Things happen though. Administrators are asked to manage and balance and work with their staff to help them when things do occur. So that's the common practice. The data that we looked at today kind of addressed that question and indicated that about 60% of the absences that were called in, that we had, were usually called in the night before or the day of. The sooner the better, of course. That would allow our subsystem and our administrators to plan according for that absence.
Thank you. I just have one thought, and that is perhaps 30 minutes. You might want to analyze a 30-minute rule, because in fairness to the sub, or finding a sub, or whatever it is, or students, 30 minutes, I've never heard of such a thing, so I don't know if that's normal. Maybe it is, but that is interesting feedback, so thank you.
Madam President, we used to have more of a requirement, but if you remember, I think it was Prop 207.
About not asking.
The sixth. So, unless there is a pattern of abuse established, so for instance, somebody takes 3 Fridays in a row,
Right.
we might question that. But otherwise,
Understand.
yeah. So we're
30 minutes. That's not set in proposition. that is an internal discussion you could have and decide what makes sense. That I just never heard of that. That's interesting. But
well.
thank you.
I mean, we're trying to think what we could do in response to somebody who, like you set a number wherever you want, 8 hours, half day, and then they violate it, but they're protected. So
yeah, it's a tough balance.
should be more in advance, and that might be something to look at.
Yeah, I would think so.
It should be more in advance, but I'm just sitting here thinking, if I get to my car and my car doesn't start,
Oh, those are always.
like those are going to happen. So I don't know.
Kids have a fever.
Right. I this past year I've walked on campus with my kid seeming fine, and they call me, and say he is 103, and I'm stuck. Like, I just walk right out of my classroom and go get him. Like.
Yeah, no, I understand those, but 60% of your absenteeism called in. That's the bigger. It isn't those that happen.
That I can imagine. It's I'm not feeling well. Let me take a nap and see, and then that night. Because I've done most of my absences, if it's an illness, it's done the night before, the morning of, because I'm like, if I sleep, maybe I'll feel better when I wake up.
Yes, we've talked about this before. This isn't the first time this has come up. This has been challenging. We had money attached to it at one time because it got so out of hand. We attached money that if you come and you work, we give you money. That worked because it was attached to dollars. So I don't know what the answer is. It's not an easy answer, but it's just something to look at. That's all. But thank you. I appreciate all your time in this.
You're welcome, Madam President.
Yeah, it's not so bad, just the numbers.
If I could just clarify, it's 60% of staff that call in for illness or personal reasons, and 30 minutes is the minimum requirement that the substitute system ASOP will take an absence. So sometimes people call in right there, they had a car breakdown, they had whatever, they can't even put it in, they have to call in. So that's what Mr. Diaz is talking about with a 30-minute to get it into the computer.
Thank you. All right, so that, thank you. That's not an action item, so.
Madam President, actually, we are looking for a motion this evening to continue the class split prep loss plan.
Because you said the next item is time, go ahead and do the next item, and then they could kind of move both of them out of order a little bit.
Absolutely. 14 and 15.
That would be perfect, because otherwise I wouldn't make a motion on it, because I don't know, even know what
Yeah.
I'm looking at.
Let's do 15, and then we can come back and decide what motion is appropriate here.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz, for kicking me off. So this evening, we would also like to look at the Littleton substitute plan in general. Teacher absences, unlike positions that do not serve in a supervisory capacity, must have a person or a sub to fill a job. And how staff classes are covered when a teacher is absent has been a longstanding problem. In one district in Ohio, they reported having less than 1/3 of the necessary substitutes needed to cover classes, which falls in line with Littleton. In 2018-19, so this is prior to the pandemic, because we know that exacerbated the problem. 20% of classes with absent teachers went unfilled. Next slide, please. Littleton has always had a plan for external and internal coverage. External coverage is the easy part. You enter your absence into a computer and a sub shows up, we hope. We've used ESI as our vendor to procure substitutes for many years, and while they make valiant efforts to find subs, our fill rate is less than adequate. As you can see from the slide, the fill rate for the first semester was 34%, and the fill rate for the second semester was 24%. However, in January, we were able to place permanent subs at sites, and this increased our fill rate by 20%. Next slide. This slide shows a summary of the absences for each semester, which Mr. Diaz referred in the second semester because he talked about how many teachers were able to be compensated for the number of coverages for unfilled classes. Next slide, please. There was an increase in the number of absences, most likely attributed to the COVID spike in January and February, so if you were wondering about that. However, the decision was made by the administration to use a little used certificate available from the Department of Education to fill the permanent sub positions that the board approved several years ago. You actually allocated one per campus, and our initial attempts to fill these positions required candidates to have or be able to obtain a standard substitute certificate. The standard certificate requires a minimum of a bachelor's degree and a fingerprint clearance card, which actually excludes quite a few people that might be interested in subbing. The issue that for us was that candidates that held these substitute certificates either took full-time positions at districts, including ours, that we were unable to fill, or the subs wanted freedom to pick and choose the dates and places they sub, so they were not interested in being a permanent substitute. In January, by filling 6 of these positions in the second semester, we increased our coverage to 20%. And I might add that every one of our permanent subs in January were quarantined. So there was an impact to that. One district in Oregon implemented this same plan, and when they compared the fall and spring semesters like we've done, their unfilled percentage dropped from 50% to just 26%. And in comparison, ours dropped from 66% to 56%. The data that you'll hear about tonight is how we went through to fill permanent subs and that we were able to increase our fill rates. National data indicates that teachers miss an average of roughly 11 days out of a 186-day school year. Arizona has a slightly lower number of days at 180. But this translates to students spending roughly 2/3 of a school year with a substitute during the entirety of their K-12 career. To compound this problem, statistics show that daily subs, who are sometimes described as warm bodies, have a negative impact on student achievement. Next slide. So in January, when we made the decision to request emergency substitute certificates, which are owned by the district, that means that the applicant must be sponsored by a district and the certificate is only valid within the requesting district. The emergency substitute certificate is not portable, meaning that if we sponsor the emergency substitute certificate, they cannot go to Tolleson Elementary and substitute on our certificate. The requirements for the emergency substitute certificate are that the applicant must hold a high school diploma at a minimum and hold a fingerprint clearance card. The certificate is good for 2 years, and to be eligible for reissuance, they must participate in professional development by either taking college courses or participating in district training, and our early release professional development days fulfill the requirement for them. The decision was made to hire these positions and to place them at specific campuses rather than placing them in a pool for HR to dispatch to openings. Permanent subs that are assigned to buildings have the advantage of knowing the school and the kids. This is most likely while traditional subs consistently prefer specific campuses, which is in part due to familiarity with the school staff and the students. One advantage of having these positions is that they stand at the ready for coverage. And national data indicates that when an absence is reported less than 24 hours prior to the occurrence, the coverage rate is approximately 90%, meaning that there's only a 10% chance that the job will be picked up. Littleton had a daily average of 17% of these call-outs this past year. This is slightly lower than the national average. The late call-out is oftentimes attributed to teachers thinking that, quote, they can make it, and knowing it's additional work to prepare for being absent, and I can attest to this as a former teacher myself, it's a lot more work to be gone than it is to show up. The pandemic, however, contributed to the need for teachers to be absent as we encouraged people to stay home when ill, no matter what the reason was. Next slide. As you can see on the screen, if we would have had more of these positions, we could have potentially increased our fill rate from 44% to 76%. Both Oregon and Rhode Island have schools implementing this same type of program. I think you're one too many, Jim, if you could go back one. Can you go back one?
One slide.
There you go. So this slide basically gives you the scenario that if we were able to increase our permanent subs from 7, which we only filled 6 this year, and add 9 more for a total of 16, 7 at our brick and mortar schools, 1 at our online academy, and 1 at the alternative program, that scenario would have contributed to the fill rate increasing to 76%. Leaving only 455 classes to be covered through other options, either the class split or the prep loss. Now we can go to the last one. Thanks, Jim. These positions make substitute teaching more attractive because unlike traditional subs, no matter their status of long or short-term assignment, the position is eligible for medical benefits within the district. The request to expand the permanent substitute program is part of a larger plan to recruit future educators to education and offer opportunities for community members that may not be able to take advantage of traditional teacher prep programs. This is a long-term investment in not only education, but also the community. The final question you probably have is the cost. There are actually two questions when considering this. What's the cost to implement it, and what's the cost not to? If we were able to cover every absence this year, the cost would have been approximately $475,000 for both long and short-term substitute coverage. And I say approximately because I used the short-term rate, which is $115, to calculate the amount. To add the requested permanent subs, we would need an additional $451,054, which includes benefits. In previous years, we have reported to you in the monitoring report that we budget roughly $500,000 for absences, both long and short term. With the current data that we have and the prior usage data, the estimated increase to our current budget allocation would be $70,000. The cost of not funding the proposal will be continued stress and emotional strain for teachers in the building who are struggling to keep up with not only their responsibilities, but filling in for others because kids need them, as Mrs. President Reyes mentioned when she talked about being at promotion. This is not new information to the board, and all of you have continually thanked staff for their commitment and dedication to the district. You have continually supported innovation as we have worked to find solutions for uncovered classes, and for this, we thank you. When the idea of adding another permanent sub to each campus was proposed to LEAP, and this was when school was recessing, so we did not have all of the data that you see tonight. They were supportive and expressed that these positions were extremely helpful in alleviating coverage issues. So the administration is asking you tonight, which I'm sure you have questions about, to add an additional 9 positions for roughly an increase to the budget of $70,000 so that we can provide further relief to schools for teacher absences.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
My first question is, these 9 additional subs, were you looking to do emergency sub certificates for them? Or are you looking for just standard sub certificates and then we would hire them?
Member Soshnik, both. We would either, depending on the applicant, we had a few that did qualify for regular substitutes as we started recruiting substitute certificates, but most we placed on emergency substitute certificates.
Increases the number of people.
And I understand it increases the number of people and it might be necessary to do it. Just it's sad and it doesn't feel like good for me to know that we're putting emergency subs in. But I also know it's probably necessary, especially with where we are in the teacher crisis in state and nationally.
And Member Soshnik, I echo your sentiments from someone who worked at the department, and basically they said never issue an emergency teaching certificate, much less an emergency sub certificate. I said no here for many years, but at the risk of losing additional staff to stress, I have to look at the overall picture for the recommendation.
And I do think not looking into this type of solution does put additional stress on your staff having to give up their prep and their planning period. And we are all, as a state, in a teacher retention crisis. And from what I understand, this will be an increase on the money side of things. I think it'll be a good way of keeping teachers happy and less stressed, which I am always for supporting our teachers as much as we can, as long as, our students are being supported equally.
Member Soshnik, I think it would be important to say that when LEAP reviewed the class coverage plan for splits and prep loss, they were appreciative and supportive of the plan presented, but they said we would rather have subs.
Are these subs across all teaching areas, including like special education, or are they just?
Member Contreras, they do fill special education classes, self-contained classes, and regular ed classes. It's also helpful because in the past year we spread out our self-contained classes so that each campus, except one, has a self-contained program so that we can spread the wealth and integrate students for socialization reasons. And they definitely stepped in. We had one that subbed for almost the entire semester in a special ed self-contained classroom. Thank you. That is what they did, what the parapro said.
So if Oregon and Rhode Island are doing it or has done it, I'm not sure what you said, what's the test scores of these children that come out of these classrooms? I mean, that's my concern. I get there's a huge teacher shortage. I get all of that. I mean, but at the end of the day, it's all about students and what they learn and what they walk away with. What are their test scores from having one of these permanent subs?
So Member Reyes, I don't have the test scores in relation to the permanent subs, but I can tell you that the national average for a decrease in achievement in English, language arts, and math, when the use of daily subs are used, is roughly 1 standard deviation lower in English, language arts, and just above 0.5% lower in mathematics, and that's the national average. So with the permanent subs, at least we have the ability to create plans and train them, hopefully growing them into the pipeline. And when you're there every day, it's similar to what Member Contreras and Dr. Freeman said. When you go into a special ed classroom, they just do what the paraprofessionals tell them to do. So they will learn and be able to pick up and know our programs more readily than a sub who might pop in and out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a teacher, but to me it feels bad. It's kind of like, it just, but I don't know what the alternative is. Having no one in the classroom.
Right. Was there any kind of data on that? If classes are empty or split or?
Yeah, what was the test scores?
I did scour a lot of information on substitutes, and I could not find anything.
Sure, they're
on that.
afraid to publish it.
Probably
yeah,
true.
You know, as a parent, you're sitting there thinking, no way, I'm not sending my kid there to someone who doesn't or has never taught anything. But on the other hand, I mean, I don't know, you don't want to send them to where there's no one to teach them either. So I don't have a better solution. I guess we could try it and, see what happens. And I mean, that's what we've kind of done, been adventurous and kind of jump out of the thing and see what happens. And I don't know what the other alternative is. I just don't, so.
And Kathy, going to your point, I think looking at the data, we're gonna need a sub in that building somewhere. And if we don't have it, then we're just looking at our teachers and saying, okay, split, give up your prep, whatever that is. And I can see it's anecdotally, but I had one of our teachers in the grade level I taught with was out for 4 months, and I had 7th grade science students in my room when I was teaching 8th grade. They did basically nothing because I can't manage my 35 8th graders and manage the 12 7th graders back there, so they played on their computers.
Yeah, it's just as bad as having someone that doesn't know how to teach. Who teaches them classroom management? How do these people come in and know classroom
Also,
management?
Kathy, I would say it's better for them to have a sub because the 7th graders weren't learning anything, but my 8th graders were distracted as well.
Yeah.
So my 8th graders' education was getting worse because they were distracted by the 7th graders in the back.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And also, to your point, President Reyes, when we have a permanent sub, they become part of the staff, and they learn Make Your Day or the PBIS program, and so they're familiar with the regular expectations within the school. It's sort of like students who don't necessarily know that a paraprofessional is not a teacher. They don't distinguish between them. And so there's a real advantage and an advantage for us to be able to grow them in our professional development practices. And our teachers on special assignment, both at the district and in the school, are able to assist them, which we hope that people will say, my goodness, we're looking forward, I can be a teacher.
Yeah.
And then we also have some programs that will pay for them. The Arizona Teaching Fellows scholarships will pay for them to become a teacher if they commit to that. So this might allow us to encourage people and give them the confidence to move forward in that.
Thank you. It's an interesting, we'll see. see how we do. At this point, then, we're going to jump back to 14, because we need a motion on 14, so I'll ask a motion on item 14.
I move the governing board approve the continuation of the class split prep loss plan.
I'll second.
There has been a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Hearing none opposed, the motion will pass. Moving on to item 15.
I move that the governing board approve the request for additional permanent substitute teacher positions.
I'll second that.
Hearing a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion will pass. Moving on to item 16, Dr. Freeman, discussion item.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This item has 2 points of discussion. So the first is, as promised, a review of the draft of the RFP. So we have on the agenda request for proposals and qualifications. We think that there are some things built in that qualify the respondents, but it really would be the release of an RFP because we will be exchanging payment for services. And there is, every time we do an RFP, there is language on the front end introducing it and language on the back end, which is signatures and checklists and those kind of things. So that boilerplate business office purchasing stuff is not included in this document. And what you'll see is if we open the document, it starts on what would be about page 4. So the first page excludes all of the introductory, like I said, boilerplate introduction. And what I want to do is just briefly take you through some of the things that are typically included in an RFP, because some of them pertain to the work that we're going to do. And then we're going to get to the scope, which is the last 6 pages of the attachment. And the question for the board will be, are there other considerations or things that you have that staff should take back and consider before we were going to move forward with releasing this? The second part of our discussion is if we engage another school that has had a partnership agreement, what kind of things would the board be asking and to whom would you want to ask? So if we're going to set up a visit, do you want to see administrators from the school, teachers from the school, parents from the school, kids from the school? And if you did, what would you ask the teachers? What would you ask the administrators? And so that's the second part. First, we're going to become familiar with the scope a little bit. And then the next part is if we want to set up this interaction between our board and a partner school that's been established, for you to brainstorm some questions. And what I'd like to be able to do is before the interaction is get those typed up and sent to them so they know who to bring into the conference to meet with you and be able to answer those questions. Does that make sense so far? Okay. What I'd like to do is if we can, Jim, scroll slowly down. I want to get to about page 10, which is page 14 of the scope. Members have the complete attachment, but in here on the 10th page, there's an item 2 and an item 3, and it's 2H, yeah, 2H, property, the school district, and public entity. So part of what happens in the lead up to the scope is that we're assuring that property of the school district is going to be taken care of. If you look in then 3 at A, B, C, and D, there's fingerprinting requirements for the people who are going to be working here, e-verification requirements. Some of the things that you might normally consider safety considerations, if you keep scrolling down to number 5, there is, just scroll down to the next page, Jim. You can see, stop, sorry. It'd be better if I was doing this. A and B under insurance, that we clarify workman's comp, scroll down a little further.
Is this
Yeah.
a template from somewhere? A template?
We have a lot of the thing for when we have hired workforce. Yeah, some of the same protections to the district in the agreement. We've never really gone through page by page
Right.
through an RFP with the board before, but because we're bringing somebody in to work with our kids, I thought it was important to make sure that you're aware of some of the things. Fingerprinting is also going to be addressed in the scope. But for anybody working around our children, that's one of our requirements. So if we go down now, it's page 16 in the document, but page 12 on the attachment. Yes. So you can see we've got a section on safety. We've got a section on licenses. Probably, Jim, if we can go ahead then and scroll down to page 18. It's 22 in the report, but 18 in your attachment.
Has an attorney looked at this?
Typically, the boilerplate is already attorney reviewed.
Okay.
The scope, which we're going to talk about next, the 6 pages of scope, is being reviewed by you, and then it will go to the attorney to make sure the attorney doesn't review stuff that you wanted in that we left out.
Gotcha.
So after we get your feedback and make sure it's not missing anything board has as a concern, then it will go to Gus Rosenfeld for review of that language. So this is fairly standard. I just want you to see how comprehensive the lead up to the scope is. And so we have in here cancellation for non-performance or for deficiency in delivery. So that's included in this work. And then on page 17, Jim, you went a little further, but we actually have conditions in here for termination of the contract. And so if you look down, I think probably if there is cancellation for conflict of interest, if you scroll a little further down, there is termination for convenience. I don't think we'd use that, but non-performance or contract deficiency, I think, is the important one. So if we were to enter into a partnership agreement and then they just failed to show up, we would cancel the contract and take over the school from there. So the main part of the scope starts on page 20 of the attachment, which actually in the draft we have is going to be page 24. So here's where we start to lay out some of the things that would be unique to this project. Okay, 24 is the page number, but 20 is the attachment number. Thank you. And so we are going to have, you can see this is pretty standard, but Mr. French is the head of operations, is the district representative on the procurement work. We have stipulated the contract and the purpose. We have a non-discrimination clause, as you would expect. We do require insurance. We have our insurance, but they're bringing people on to the property. They need to be also insured. Then we have fingerprinting requirements. These are people that not just aren't going to be working on the site, but would be alone supervising children. They need to meet all the same requirements as a teacher. We have a hiring commitment. So what we envision in the calendar of events, which I'll review just briefly. Remember, school choice starts in February. So what we expect, and I'm going to, for ease of communicating with you guys, I'm going to say 3rd quarter of the year is the school choice quarter. 4th quarter of the year is everybody finds out which school they're going to next year, which means 2nd quarter of the year, they need to have people in place to get all the information and everything ready for the Alomar school to be presented to parents 3rd quarter. So we would have really 1st quarter to finish this so they could bring on a planning group for school choice for February. So that needs to happen in the 2nd quarter of next school year. So what we said in the hiring commitment, if they can't even bring that team together for October, November, December, and January to be ready for February, then they're not going to be able to follow through with the commitment. That gives us a little time to regroup and rebrand and change the staffing for the school year ourselves. So we put a hiring commitment in there. For licenses and certifications, what we plan to do is if they're bringing a unique field, unique candidate to the program, is that they would be treated much the same way Teach for America teachers are, except that we would be working with the partner on a 2-year internship program to certify them on the job, much like Teach for America does. And so Dr. Haid already has underway some collaboration happening with NAU and other school districts that we want to get going next year. That would be a year in advance of needing to do this, that we hope to be able to expand into a program like that. So this approach, a little different than what you heard from emergency subs, is to find high quality people and get them a credential versus looking at where you can get people and credential them to fill in. It's almost the opposite approach. Now, if there's some reason there would be reduction in force, and I think this kind of went to your comment last time, Ms. Sausnick, is that they would have to do reduction in force the same way we would, but that we would prioritize our staff above the partner staff. So if you scroll down a little further, there's going to be performance evaluation surveys and evaluation of their work that would be built in. The part where you see evaluation criteria to be determined, each one of these sections would be scored by a review team, but we're not revealing all of the scoring criteria in the draft because this is going to be eventually sent out to everybody to respond. And so weighting the points for each of the sections of the response hasn't been done yet. We have an evaluation timeline. That is standard and it goes in. Right now it's first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, and then the start of the year. So we have a four-quarter buildup, but we don't have dates attached to those yet. So we just can't put in an RFP that goes out first quarter. We actually have to say something like September 1st. And so that will be pinned down, but there's a placeholder for that. If you scroll down a little further, then you can see how we're going to award. There is a restriction on lobbying members of the committee or any kind of reprisals. This is pretty standard language that our business office includes. And then you can see we have a procedure for acknowledging amendments, authority to act, and those kind of things, which is also fairly standard. Couple more pages to go here. There's a little bit about the district to help people who are going to respond to know about us, and that might shape their response. Of course, they can research our website and a whole bunch of other things like that. Now, here's what we're looking at in terms of workforce. We're describing what the school is and what our requirements are, fair labor standards, and all of those things as a government entity that we fall under. We have estimated that we want to start out with a K-5 campus of about 3 homeroom teachers per grade level. That would include special ed services, paraprofessional support, and those kind of things. I think that's a little further down.
Yes, under staffing model.
Yeah, and so we want them to have a school leader. We think the school leader probably needs their own clerical person, but we would provide junior clerical support so that we still have eyes and ears in the front office and make sure that safety procedures and those kinds of things are followed. They would have paraprofessionals for the classroom, 18 to 19 gen ed teachers, 1 or 2 special ed teachers, probably that might even be 1.5 depending on that number of rooms. Generally, what we would do is if we had probably 1 special education teacher maybe every 12, 13, 14 homerooms. So this kind of splits the difference there, but it would depend on your enrollment. And then special area teachers Usually we use a formula like a special area teacher for every 7 homeroom teachers. So if you have 18 or 19, you probably would need something like 2.7, which is hard to get. 3 or more, but they may also want to have one for acceleration or, you know, like a gifted teacher or something like that. So we've added some flexibility in there. That'll be part of their response. But what we didn't want people to think is we were going to try to fill Alomar and take kids out of all the other schools to fill that in. The other thing that it does is it gives them room to grow. So the parents who are sending their kids there, then the 5th graders can go to 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade, much the way we grew out the Fine Arts Academy as we added grade levels. That just made the most sense to us, especially since we're growing now at a 3 or 4% rate. That's not, I mean, we had, when I first came here, years where we added 500 kids a year, and that's a little different growth rate than the rate that we're at. So we believe the staffing model for a year from now is designed to grow into that. If we have sudden growth in student enrollment this year, we can revise this. You know, where we have a need for more teachers and more space. We've gone through qualifications, which I've already touched on, is that we're going to help make sure that those teachers meet the same standards as teachers we already have working in the school district. And the analogy I made was with Teach for America teachers. If they have adopted curriculum materials that they want to use, we want to have them on display and available for the public and the board to review, just like anything else we would adopt. What we expect from the governing board and the community is to give them some latitude in that, and you would be looking for things that you thought were inappropriate for kids, you know, maybe sent the wrong message in some way, offensive to the community, those kind of things. So you still have oversight, but if they had a committee of teachers, it would be their committee of teachers, not our committee of teachers. So there's, what we imagine happening is they might be adopting materials in mathematics the same year we're adopting materials in reading. So we're essentially running 2 adoptions, an Alomar Academy, a Prep Academy adoption, and a Littleton District adoption, but the board still has the oversight and the ability to, I guess, veto something that you thought was inappropriate or bad. If we continue down, we have made clear the facilities are ours. They'll be managed by us. Our maintenance people will be taking care of them. We'll provide custodians, cafeteria staff, and all of those support things. If there is inadequate service, there's a response from us where we notify the provider. There's a clause in there for changes in law. As you know, the legislature likes to dabble in Title 15. And so between now and when that school opens, we have a consideration for that. Appropriations. Oh, if there's any determination about the legality, severability, and the relationship of the district, that's all pretty standard language. That's not new to the scope, but it's the last page of the scope section. And after that, it's the forms where people check in, you know, when they submit, they check in, they check that they have all this stuff, and so the rest is really technical boilerplate. That's a quick overview of the draft so far. I think the Madam President, questions would be, is there something that you're thinking of you would like to see in there that we didn't think of or include, so we could get some language for that? That would be one. And then the other would be to, or something of concern, the other would be to move to the second part of the discussion, like if we were going to confer with a partner school, who do we need to talk to and what do we need to ask? I'll defer to you then, Madam President.
This is a pretty small thing, but in your list of employees, is the district providing a nurse or a health assistant, or are we expecting them to bring one?
No, that's support, and thank you for bringing that up, because it probably is good for us to clarify for the respondent. What we've said in our discussions is we're providing support staff, but it probably would be helpful for people to respond for us to list that out, just like we've asked. And, you know, thank you, because we've been talking about this for months in the same closed circle. We know what we mean, but that may not be. So we will clarify with specificity the support from the district for support staff. Thank you.
Anything else, Amy?
Not right now.
Sarah? I'm gonna wait till our attorney looks at it. I'm curious more the legality of it, right? Is it solid? Is it?
We've had several meetings with her leading up to this. So the thing about having the dual adoption process came from the attorney. What we did is dealt at a conceptual and problem-solving level, where she went through concerns like the certification and the curriculum adoption. Those all came from the attorney.
That's good.
We haven't sent the language to her. What we did is meet with her in advance to see things that she wanted to be sure were in the scope. And then our next step is to meet with you, and then after this, we can send it to her, and I'm sure there'll be some editing.
Yeah, I'm absolutely sure it's gonna.
But we need to give her some bones to work off of.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's fine. I don't have any.
And we'll clarify that support for people who would want to respond. Thank you.
And then-
I have one more question, and this just popped into my head, so I apologize. In a prior conversation we've had tonight, we've said that we've tried to spread out our self-contained exceptional student programs. Are we looking to put one at this school as well? Because that would bring in a whole nother frame of mind for me to look at this.
Madam President, Ms. Sousnick, we did not consider that in their, in their pioneering year. That could potentially happen if we were out of space everywhere else. Right now, we're not projecting that. And we're a little resistant to move those programs. What happens is families and teachers, staff get used to being at the school and bond. And so we've tried to, when we make changes in those programs, be incremental about it. And there's been times, I know Dr. Haig could tell you, where we felt like we had to move a program and had to do a lot of work with staff and families to try to smooth that over, because there's just generally a resistance to it. So it's not in our planning to do that at this point, but we can't, unless there was sudden rapid growth, we wouldn't need to do that.
I'm happy to hear that.
So you can now move on to the second phase?
So our questions for the board were, we found a sample partner school. We found that travel there from east to west for time of day was prohibitive to do in one day. If we went, we'd have to find a hotel room, and the cost of travel and airlines and everything is outrageous now. So before we move ahead with either a personal trip or a virtual trip, the nonprofit consultants have suggested, and I agree with them, who would we like to talk with and what would we like to ask them so that we can prepare for, and I thought maybe even it would be the board's next study session is to have kind of like we did in the other room today, one table from Texas and one table from Littleton, being able to interact and ask questions. But we need to get the right people and have them prepared so they're not saying, I'll get back to you on that once we get everybody together.
Amy, do you have thoughts?
Yeah. So I think I would definitely want to be able to talk to parents and really any stakeholder I would want to be able to talk to. So I don't know if that helps very much.
Well, parents is one.
Parents, teachers, and definitely students. I would want to be able to talk to students and find out, how they feel about the program, especially in our school choice model. Our kids pick where they want to go with parent guidance. So why would they choose this,
So one question would be if they got told they were going there, or if they
Yeah.
selected to go there, and then
And how is, if possible, if they have experience in a more traditional format, like how is this different? What makes this school better or this model better for them? And then parents, how do they feel about the fact that it is not a traditional teacher program, like teachers in there? And why did they choose to send their kid to that program knowing that that's not a traditional format? And then teachers, how do they feel? Just why would they choose to teach at that school? Like, I guess that's more personal questions, but I want to get a feel for how this program works and how it's embraced by the community.
Money? No, I don't know.
Well, and that's a whole nother issue I could go off on, so we're not going to start there.
well, one of the things that we anticipated in the people we talked to is their work calendar and their professional development calendar is different, partly because of compensation, where they may bring people in, and this is what I heard, they'll do 10 days of intensive workshops in the summer where that would be unusual unless the teacher elected on their own to go to a summer course or something like that. But that's part and parcel of being on this team. And so people know when they sign up that they're not in the whole bargaining agreement of everybody else, and they're not violating any bargaining agreement if they do 10 days of professional development in the summer and get paid for it. So, so that gives them not only some work calendar latitude, but some compensation latitude. And that's part of what I understand is the difference in the attraction. But I don't know about the school in Texas. I mean, it'd be interesting to hear what they're doing, or if that was something they did in the beginning, but they don't do it anymore, those kind of things.
I guess I also would want to talk to someone in their district HR and find out, how has the teachers who have stayed in the district schools felt about this, and has
everybody else,
compared to the new teachers, and how have they taken the district going into this pathway? I understand why we're doing this. It kind of gives me that uneasy feeling because I feel like we have to do this. It's a necessary evil, I guess, right now where I'm at, but doesn't mean I have to like that we're doing it. But I feel like we have to do what's best for kids. And I know I've had a few community members reach out to me very against this, and I'm just trying to say, well, you give me a better solution.
Against it, why?
Just because they don't like the idea of another group coming in that isn't a traditional teacher. And I've had some teachers reach out saying that they feel like we're saying that anyone can do their job. And it has sprung up mainly because I'm walking around getting signatures in the community, so we initiate the conversation that way. So
I like the response, though. Like, what's your plan? Yeah.
Well, what would be interesting is what if it does excel, and what if it excels?
Oh, no.
we found a plan that works best for kids.
Whoops.
Sarah?
I'd like to hear from teachers and the leadership. I mean, we talked earlier about how close-knit of a community we are as a district, and I'd like to hear how their leadership and their teachers, like if they've gone into communities that way and how they've been able to, I guess,
integrate,
win
fit
over or integrate, because, I mean, I'm hesitant. I know it's something that's needed, but there's still some resistance there because we are such a close-knit community. Our district is very close-knit, and to bring somebody new in, and I don't want, my fear is that this, our Alomar will be seen as this new school. It'll be singled out, viewed as differently, and I don't want that. I think it needs to be, our district needs to be equitable as well.
Well, we control enrollment. They don't pick kids. They go through our central and choice enrollment. But what you're saying makes me think of something that might be better included in the scope and that we talk about integration with the partner district in the community in the school district. Like, I don't think that's addressed in there. And if it's interesting to me because it came out in the discussion of what you want to ask other people, but not in the review of the scope. Those seem to me to be related. Like, if we have an expectation about them being integrated in the district and in the community with our initiatives and our issues, like, we should add that as an expectation. They're not going to be an island unto themselves. They're going to, be present at other things. The spelling bee and the math science and the, everything else is, if there's a district thing like that, they're expected to be included. Is that something that, yeah.
I would definitely want them to be included. Something else that I heard at the National School Board Association, and Dr. Freeman, you talking just brought it up, in their Tacoma Public Schools, in their bids and stuff that they send out, they put a requirement of the groups coming in that they employ people from the community. And I don't know if we could work that in some way. I know that they're bringing their own teachers. We're saying we can't find teachers. This is why we're going this way. But if we could require them to engage in the community a little bit more, or maybe after we've selected them, they have to have leaders come out and come to school functions and kind of get to know around here, and not their whole staff, but just start to see their faces. So I feel like they're more part of the Littleton community.
It's interesting you say that, because one of the people I talked to, we've had a large number of TFA teachers who've gone through here, is some of them have gone on to administration and still have fond memories. So a couple people talked to me about TFA candidates, like the head of TFA taught here, that an opportunity like this might be something that one of those people who was a core member here in 2005 or 6 or 7 would come back to be the principal at a program like this. And so, like I said, we've had, one of my big concerns with TFA early on was we'd have these great teachers and then they would hire them to do recruiting and stuff. I'm like, no, I put all this work into them. And so the person who's the executive director right now did his Teach for America teaching in the Littleton School District. So I think there is a potential for some of these potential candidates to come back home to communities where, or communities like ours, where they wouldn't normally have that opportunity to do something like that. And so, I mean, I think we can do, I'm trying to think of that when they respond, if they can respond with some existing or established or historical connections to the community, that should be part of their response. Mm-hmm. I like that.
So I just had a pretty much, I won't repeat what they've said because mine is weaved in there. But as far as who I want to talk to, I want whatever their equal is a paraprofessional. I want a person who's actually doing I don't mean to say majority, but a lot of the day-to-day movement. I want to speak to them. And then we have parent teachers, HR, lots of questions for HR, so we want an HR person there. Turnover rate in their programs, longevity in their programs, disciplinary issues, how much disciplinary. I could send them to you. I wrote them.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Those are just reports. I'd want to see how many disciplinary issues they have in their classrooms, right? Because if we find
not
that,
staff, kids.
yeah, because that tells you, it's going to tell you a lot. And then longevity. If their longevity is no more than 2, we got a problem to begin with, right? So that's that. Success rate of students and graduation, how that looks, what it looks like, whatever that is. Academic scoring, that may come from HR too. Or have the administrators, someone talking about curriculum, and they can talk about their success rate of students and math scores and all of that good stuff. What the average compensation is they've seen versus traditional compensation. What's it look like? What's the percentage difference? And really, how are they able to afford it? Like, what makes that unique? And so that marketing goes, when she said it to me, I want to see their marketing. How do you come in and market your school? What's it look like? What's your PIO do? Like, how do you market it? Because I have the same concern. Going into Alamar, as a parent in Alamar, I'm not going to know it's traditional versus I'm not going to know it. I'm going to walk in and go, hi, Mrs. Jones. And I'm just going to think that's Mrs. Jones. So when they market it, it'll be interesting to see how they market. Do they market like Littleton? If not, that could be a problem going back to that community, because then you have Alamar versus everyone else, and that can be a problem. So it goes to that equitable enrollment. And how do they attract their teachers? If there's a teacher shortage, how are they getting so many? How do they keep them? And that's all HR questions. So those, lots of my questions are for HR. And I'll send them to you.
Thank you.
Oh, a number of children in classrooms. If they're out in
Class
classrooms,
size.
yeah.
It's,
Well, they're all HR things, though, really.
None of you said you want a politician or board member or community member?
Well, I thought about it. I wrote it and I scribbled it. And my thought was, first, a board member, what are you going to say? You're not going to bash your own school.
I think some of these emerge out of like an achievement need. They're a turnaround program. You know, you put a school that's been struggling or whatever, so you look for a partner and you come in. The big difference, I think, for us is we're launching a brand new school out of the ground as opposed to coming in and intervening in one that was struggling.
Do they have a board?
It's a public school, but I mean, it's a good question. What is their governance model and how do they handle that?
That's
Yeah.
a good question, because I don't know the dynamics of the hierarchy.
Neither do I.
That's a good question. And if they have a board, is that in conflict with our board? I don't know.
How do they handle those issues?
Yeah.
Okay, great job, you guys.
We knew it.
I'm really, I'm kind of surprised, but way to go.
All right, so.
We'll work on it.
Thank you. With that, it looks like that's our last item, so I'll have a motion for adjournment.
I move that we adjourn at 8:27.
I'll second that.